Dr. Salonke, a teacher from Sri Shivaji Vidya Mandir and Junior College, Aunth. I welcome all of you in this session of English language. Students, in earlier session, we discussed 4 figures of speech like alliteration, repetition, simile and metaphor. We also discussed some of the lines from the first poem song of the Open Road in the earlier session. So today we are going to focus on one of the significant figures of speech in this session. The title of the figure of speech is inversion, which is related with the structure of sentence in English language. Inversion is an interesting figure of speech which is mostly used by the poets in the poetry. Actually, there are different reasons behind using the figure of speech inversion by poets, authors and writers. So let me clarify first of all what are the different reasons, different purposes behind using the figure of speech inversion in the poetry or in the piece of literature. So the first reason behind using the figure of speech is to achieve a particular effect the author, the writer, the poet wants. The second reason may be to lay emphasis on the particular part of that line or sentence. The third reason may be sometimes the writer or the poet wants to change the focus of the readers from one point to another point in the poetry or in the piece of literature, and therefore they make the use of inversion in their writing. Sometimes in poetry, the poets make use of inversion to create the rhyme, to create a musical quality or rhythm in the poetry, and therefore most of the poets employ the figure of speech inversion in their poetry. So these are different reasons so that the poets make use of the figure of speech inversion in their poetry. Now let us focus on what is meant by inversion. So as we know that in each language the sentence has the concrete, the definite order of words. The sentence is constructed with the definite order, the definite sequence of the words. For example, in English language, we have the standard pattern of the sentence like subject plus verb plus object. I mean, every sentence in English language is constructed following this pattern. The sentence begins with subject, the subject is followed by the verb, and the sentence ends with the object. So this is the pattern, this is the construction we normally follow while writing or while speaking in English language. Sometimes this normal flow of language is manipulated, changed, is inverted, is reversed for different kinds of purposes, for different reasons by the authors or poets in their writing. It is not necessary for the writers or the poets to follow this rigid pattern of the sentence every time in their writing. They have freedom to change this strict order of the word when they want to achieve a particular type of effect in their poetry. So I have already discussed the different reasons so that these writers or poets make use of the figure of speech inversion. So as I told you, inversion means when the word order or the sequence of the word is changed. The word order is inverted or reversed for particular intention. That line or that sentence is considered to be an example of the figure of speech inversion. The most common example of inversion we find in our writing or in our speaking is of the interrogative sentences. The interrogative sentences are also considered to be an example of the figure of speech inversion. For example, if I say, if you look at the sentence, interrogative sentence, is he going to school? If you look at this sentence carefully, this is interrogative sentence, and this sentence begins with the auxiliary verb is. The auxiliary verb is followed by the subject or the pronoun he. So here we have changed the standard pattern, subject, verb and object, and therefore interrogative sentences are also considered to be examples of the figure of speech inversion. The second most commonly examples we find is of exclamatory sentences. Let us look at the word. If you see the sentence, what a beautiful house it is. It is an exclamatory sentence, of course. What a beautiful house it is. So this is also considered to be an example of the figure of speech inversion. How fast he runs. Let us look at the word. The second exclamatory sentence. How fast he runs. This is an exclamatory sentence. It begins with the WH word how, and this how is followed by the adverb fast, followed by the subject he, and then we have the verb run. So when the normal flow of language, when the normal order of the sentence or the word, the normal order of the word is changed, is reversed, in that case we have the figure of speech inversion. So interrogative sentences, exclamatory sentences are also considered to be examples of the figure of speech inversion. Let us look at the word. Sometimes some affirmative and negative sentences are also known as examples of the figure of speech inversion. Let us look at the sentence of the figure of speech inversion. Mohan went to school, so did his brother. Mohan went to school and so did his brother. So if you look at the second half of this sentence, the next part of the sentence, so did his brother. So here also we have the figure of speech inversion, because we can also write down this sentence, we can also see this sentence like this. Mohan went to school and his brother also went, or his brother also too went. So this is how also this sentence can be written. But if you look at the board and see the sentence, Mohan went to the school and so did his brother. So here the words so and did are placed before the subject his brother, and therefore this sentence is also an example of the figure of speech inversion. Sometimes in negative sentence also we find the figure of speech inversion. Let us look at the board and see the sentence. Never have I understood this plan. This is also an example of the figure of speech inversion, because I could have written this sentence in this way: I have never understood this plan. So this is the normal pattern, normal construction in English language. I have never understood this plan. So instead I have written the sentence: never have I understood this plan. So I have changed, I have reversed the order of the words, and therefore never have I understood this plan is an example of the figure of speech inversion. Sometimes the adverbials like hardly, rarely, seldom are used in the beginning of the sentence. So there also we find the figure of speech inversion. So when we studied the first poem, Song of the Open Road, in that poem also we have some examples of the figure of speech inversion. If you look at the page number 94, where the poem Song of the Open Road begins, the first line of the poem, let us look at the word. The first line of the poem Song of the Open Road. I read the line: a foot and light-hearted I take to the open road. So this is also an example of the figure of speech inversion. If you look at the order of the words, a foot and light-hearted I take to the open road. So here the poet had changed the order of the words. The poet could have written this line in this way: I take to the open road a foot and light-hearted. So instead, the poet has employed the figure of speech inversion to lay emphasis, to place emphasis on the part of foot and light-hearted. This is what? This is where the poet wants to place emphasis in this line of the poem, and therefore this line of foot and light-hearted I take to the open road is the best example of the figure of speech inversion. Now let us come to the second example from the same poem, Song of the Open Road. If you see the second last line from the page 94, I read the line, you look at the word: strong and content I travel the open road. Look at the line of the poem. Strong and content I travel the open road. Here also the poet has changed. The poet has inverted the order of the words in this line of the poem. The poet could have written this line in this way: I travel the open road strong and content. But the part strong and content occurs in the beginning of the line, and therefore this line is also an example of the figure of speech inversion. So when the word order is reversed, when the word order is changed, in that case we have the figure of speech inversion in the line of the poem or in the sentence. So I hope that you must have understood the figure of speech inversion. Inversion simply means when the standard pattern which we have in English language, like subject, verb and object, is changed for a particular reason. In that case, we have the figure of speech inversion. We have discussed some non-textual examples as well as textual examples from the poem Song of the Open Road. I am sure that you must have understood what is meant by the figure of speech inversion. How do poets employ this figure of speech in the poetry and for what purposes? So I stop here. Thank you.